My son gave his mother-in-law a BMW with a red bow. I only got $3. So I left and blocked him. I was always that mother who put everyone else first. I lived my life discreetly, supporting my son every step of the way, believing that love and presence were enough to build eternal bonds. But everything changed one Christmas that was supposed to be nothing but joy. Amidst the toasts and smiles, I saw my son hand a luxury car with a red bow to his stepmother and give me only $3. In that instant, I realized that something much bigger than a preference had taken root. It was more than pain. It was a sign that I needed to react for myself and for my history. What happened next was intense, painful, but also transformative. Today, I look back with pride at the woman I've become. I'm happy to have you here. Follow my story to the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. The table was meticulously set, as I always made sure to prepare it, even when my soul was in tatters. I waited, albeit silently, for a gesture that would remind me that I was seen, that my presence had some value beyond functionality. Tyler arrived with an artificial smile, carrying a huge box with a red bow. Claire opened it and shrieked with emotion. A brand new BMW. Everyone laughed, toasted. When it was my turn, I received a small children's piggy bank with $3 inside. It's symbolic, Tyler said. I smiled with a broken heart. I was paralyzed for a few moments. I watched Claire flaunt the car key like a trophy of victory, while I tried to understand what I had done to deserve such forgetfulness. The gift wasn't just an insult. It was a message. I felt shame burn on my skin like a silent fever. I looked around and realized that no one noticed my pain. Claire spoke loudly, laughing, excited about the new car's features. It was as if I were disappearing before their eyes. I calmly stood up, while everyone was still distracted with the toasts. I walked to the kitchen to breathe. I needed a few minutes to hold back the tears before returning to the living room. But as I turned, I noticed something curious. Claire had left her purse on the kitchen counter, open, half fallen. By instinct, I approached. I didn't know what I was looking for. Perhaps proof that my intuition wasn't crazy. The purse exuded a strong smell of expensive perfume. Inside, I saw a beige folder. I hesitated, but something in me, something I didn't recognize, whispered, "Look." I pulled out the folder and opened it slowly. Documents, papers, bank statements. And then my heart stopped for a second. A photo of the facade of my house, taken from afar, as if through a hidden lens. A second image, me entering the gate, carrying bags. Eleanor silently stands up, and Claire forgets her purse on the counter. There were more photos. A sequence showing the back of the house, my bedroom window, my garden. Everything so meticulously recorded that it looked like a detective's report. Among the papers, I recognized documents with my full address, copies of the property title, even utility bills that I didn't remember authorizing. All in Claire's name. A chill ran down my spine. Why would she have access to all of this? My fingers trembled as I quickly flipped through the papers. Some showed suspicious financial transactions, bank accounts in tax havens. One document cited my name as deceased in an old draft will. Everything was organized, meticulous, as if someone was planning a complete takeover of my life. I stepped away from the counter as if it were on fire. I didn't want to touch anything anymore, and at the same time I couldn't let go of it. I returned to the living room trying to appear natural, but my body no longer obeyed. Claire was distracted with her cell phone. I grabbed my purse and said I needed to leave early. Tyler seemed surprised, but didn't insist. I needed to think. Once in my car, I parked 2 streets away and took a deep breath. The image of that photo, me entering the house, wouldn't leave my mind. Who took that? When? How? The feeling of being watched was suffocating. I began to question all my recent days. I tried to remember if I had seen anyone strange on the street, any car parked for too long. Everything now seemed like a fog of carelessness. I, who had always been so cautious, so methodical. How did I let this happen? How did I allow them to invade my privacy so easily? Suddenly, everything made sense. Claire's sideways glances, Tyler's frequent visits with vague excuses, the insistence on knowing about my will. There was a plan, and I was the disposable piece. I couldn't trust anyone. But before taking any action, I needed to understand the extent of the trap. Eleanor sees a photo of herself entering the house. Who is watching? 2 days later, I heard knocks on the door. It was a familiar yet still strange face. Derek, Claire's youngest son. We were never close. His gaze was serious, his shoulders tense. He said he needed to talk to me urgently. I invited him in, still cautious. He hesitated before saying that Claire had disappeared. Vanished, were his exact words. Left her phone, cards, everything. Something in the way he spoke made me pay attention. There was a nervousness there that didn't seem to be just concern for his mother. I asked what he knew, but he said he was trying to understand as well. Then I mentioned the forgotten purse, and the contents I had found. Derek paled. I asked him to sit down, showed him some of the photos and documents. He seemed to recognize some of the paperwork. As we talked, a disquiet grew between us. Derek said he had already suspected his mother's actions, especially after she started associating with people involved in financial fraud. He never had proof, but he knew she was manipulative. She lies as naturally as she breathes, he said. The phrase sent shivers down my spine. That woman wasn't just self-serving. She was dangerous. I shared my suspicions about the surveillance, the photos, the documents. He wasn't surprised, just more worried. He asked to scan everything. I agreed, but still with reservations. I needed to know how far he was willing to go. Derek seemed sincere, but the blood was still hers. As he was about to leave, he turned and asked a question that froze my heart. Did she say she had no children? Cliffhanger, Derek asks. Did she say she had no children? Amanda looked at each sheet as if deciphering a riddle. I trusted her. A meticulous lawyer, appropriately cold, but with an admirable sense of justice. As she read the documents I had taken from Claire's purse, her expression tightened. There were glaring inconsistencies. Bank accounts in the names of shell companies, financial authorizations that made no sense, and legal details that only a professional would notice. She looked me in the eyes and said, "This was rigged. Claire is not who she says she is." The copies of the bills and documents about my house indicated a plan in progress, with serious ramifications. Amanda explained that the use of private information in property records without consent was a serious crime. She said we needed to act cautiously but quickly. And then she found something even more disturbing. It was a power of attorney, an apparently legitimate document that gave Tyler powers over my legal and financial decisions. But I had never signed that. Amanda checked the details, the seals, and remained silent for a few seconds. She looked up and blurted out, "He's involved." My world spun again. One of the papers mentions Tyler's name with power of attorney. We went to the notary's office together the next morning. I wanted answers, and I needed the truth. The attendant located the records and retrieved the originals. Amanda asked to see the signature attached to the power of attorney. When the papers arrived, I felt my stomach churn. The signature. It was mine, but it wasn't. The handwriting was close, but there were imprecise, hesitant strokes. Amanda confirmed what I already suspected. Forgery. The notary's clerk said that Claire had appeared personally with Tyler to legitimize the document. That was like a dagger to my heart. My own son. Signing something false. With her. We left there in silence. In the car, Amanda broke the silence. "We need to protect everything that is yours immediately." I agreed. I called my accountant. I asked him to freeze any financial movements in my name. That same afternoon, I called Amanda to witness an important change. Sitting at my old wooden table, I drafted a new version of my will. In it there was a clear clause. My house, my most precious asset, would be donated to an NGO that cared for abandoned elderly people. Amanda reviewed, approved, we signed. I felt a cold relief run through my body. That wasn't just protection. It was a message. I wouldn't let them destroy my story, or turn my life into a negotiable asset. Claire wanted to play? Then she would play with me. But according to my rules, Eleanor changes will to donate everything to an institution. That night, I sat for hours in the living room armchair. The $3 piggy bank was still on the shelf, like a bitter reminder. I knew that continuing to be fair and transparent would put me at a disadvantage against someone like Claire. She manipulated, distorted, erased tracks. So I decided I wouldn't play fair. I mentally outlined the next steps. I needed to arm myself, but intelligently. No direct confrontation. Everything would have to seem spontaneous. I talked to Amanda, who understood my plan. Total discretion, she said. We're going to record everything possible. Nothing can escape. It was the beginning of a new phase. I stopped being the kind, invisible mother. Now I would be the woman who survived and reacted. The next day I went to an electronics store. I asked for the most discreet equipment they had. The salesman showed me a small recorder hidden inside a pin. I bought two. And as I left the store, I noticed something new within me. A raw, silent determination. They wanted to erase me. I would choose to shine but in the shadows until it was time to reveal the truth. I arrived home, sat at the table, and looked at an old photograph of me with Tyler in his early years. There was love there. There was truth. And perhaps there was still time to save him from all this. But now I needed to be cold. She buys a hidden recorder. Claire arrived at the cafe with the punctuality of someone who plans every move. She sat with affected elegance and a condescending smile. I already knew that kind of expression. It seemed welcoming, but it hid venom. She ordered a cappuccino, looked around, and then made her proposal. Have you ever thought about selling your house and renting it back? It would be a good investment for you, and security for the future. The idea sounded absurd, but I disguised it. I asked what she meant by that exactly. Claire explained, with flowery and empty terms, that a group of investors specializing in family properties was looking for houses with soul, and that mine was perfect. She guaranteed that I could continue living there, with a lifetime contract. But everything in her speech gave me chills. It was a plan of domination wrapped in kindness. I made fake notes in a small notepad, as if seriously evaluating the proposal. Claire didn't seem to realize that I already saw her intentions. She gestured too much, trying to maintain the facade of a concerned friend. But the haste in presenting solutions was suspicious. I remained silent for a moment, and she filled the void with a carefully placed phrase. This group doesn't usually wait. Opportunities are limited. My gaze remained serene, but inside, everything in me was arming itself. She wasn't speaking on impulse. Every word was a chess piece. It was a hunt, and she wanted me to offer myself as prey. Claire says the group only has limited opportunities. I took a deep breath and entered the game. I said the proposal was interesting, that it made sense in such unstable times. Claire relaxed her shoulders and smiled like someone winning a battle. I asked about values, dates, types of contracts. I showed myself curious, enthusiastic, but without seeming desperate. The more I asked, the more she revealed. She spoke of tax benefits, angel investors, and a return that would change my life. The charade cost me energy. With each new lie, my desire was to confront her, but I needed to maintain the strategy. I let her see in me a woman frightened by the future, vulnerable. Claire believed it. She even showed a preview of the contract model, which looked more like a noose ready to hang me. I feigned surprise, feigned gratitude. And then, as expected, she asked for something. If you can send me a copy of the house documents by tomorrow, I can reserve your spot in the group. Her voice was syrupy, like someone offering protection, but with hands hiding claws. I agreed with a smile, promising to take care of it today. Claire said goodbye, satisfied, left money on the table, and floated out, as if she had just sealed a great deal. I stayed there a few more minutes, watching the steam rise from the cup. I knew she underestimated my intelligence, and that was the best weapon I had. I wrote everything down with details. The time had come to set up the next play. Claire urgently asks for house documents. I went back home and immediately called Amanda. She came in the late afternoon, carrying a folder full of white papers, and a look that already anticipated my request. Time for the bait? She asked, and I just nodded. We spent hours forging a fake inheritance left by a distant relative. It was convincing. Stamps, seals, cross-reference dates. Amanda was brilliant and I, determined. We created a narrative where my house would be about to receive a millionaire investment, the result of an international partition. All she, Claire, had to do was convince me to sign the sale to a third party, and everything would officially become hers. Amanda smiled as she stamped the last sheet. Greed doesn't resist high numbers, she said. And she was right. This would be the perfect trap. The next day, I sent a message to Claire saying I had news and the documents in hand. She replied in seconds, scheduling a new conversation. But this time she wanted to introduce me to these investors. She claimed it would be a unique opportunity, and that they wanted to hear from me about my emotional commitment to the house. I laughed inside. Even emotion would be capitalized on by them. Amanda suggested we bring discreet witnesses. Derek offered to be present without Claire knowing. The pieces were positioning themselves on the board, and I was no longer fleeing the fight. Now I was leading every step. And for the first time I felt that Claire was about to taste her own poison. Claire schedules a meeting with supposed investors. Tyler arrived on Sunday late afternoon, unannounced. He carried in his eyes a weight I knew well, unspoken guilt. I offered him tea, he refused. He sat down slowly, as if the sofa were made of thorns. Silence. Then in a low voice he asked if we could talk. I said yes, but first he needed to listen to me. And I went straight to the point. I told him I knew about the fake power of attorney. That I had been to the notary's office. That I saw the signature and knew it wasn't mine. I showed him the papers, the statements. Each page was a mirror of what he had helped to build. Tyler turned pale. He tried to justify, then stopped. He lowered his head, his eyes teary. He said he didn't know how much it would hurt me. I said it wasn't just pain. It was disappointment. He put his hands to his face, remained silent for a few minutes. When he spoke, it was like an ill-contained outburst. He said he was without a stable job, that he was waiting for a promotion that never came. Claire appeared with promises, with shortcuts, with ready-made solutions. She spoke of anticipating the future, of preserving wealth. He wanted to believe, perhaps out of cowardice, perhaps out of despair. And he gave in. Hearing that was like reliving every Christmas when I hid my pain so he would smile. He was sorry, I knew. But that didn't erase what had been done. When I asked about the car, he hesitated, swallowed hard, and confessed. The BMW was part of the deal. She said it would be a symbolic gesture, to show commitment to the plan. The BMW was to show commitment. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. There was no more room for shouting or accusations. Only truths. I told Tyler that I didn't hate him, but that he would have to act to repair everything. That it wasn't enough to repent. It took courage to undo what he helped create. He looked at me with boyish eyes, as when he apologized for breaking something I loved. I explained the plan that Amanda and I were conducting. I told him about the meeting, the fake documents, the hidden recorder. Tyler listened in silence, without interrupting. In the end he just said, "I'll help." That, said with such humility, carried more weight than any excuse. For the first time in months I saw the son I raised there before me. I asked him to talk to Claire, to pretend he was still on her side. We needed her to give herself up willingly, driven by greed. Tyler agreed. It was the least, but it was also the first step towards something bigger. As he prepared to leave, I let my hand lightly touch his. There was no forgiveness yet, but there was hope. That's when we heard the kitchen door open. Julia was there, standing wide-eyed, hearing everything. The silence that followed was heavy as stone. Julia hears everything and enters the living room. Julia remained motionless for a few moments after hearing everything. Her eyes swept the room as if the world had shifted. When she finally spoke, her voice was trembling but firm. She said she felt betrayed too, but that now she understood how much she had been manipulated. She placed her hand on my shoulder and whispered, "I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner." And then, "I want to help." We met with Amanda that same night. For the first time we were all on the same side. The lawyer outlined a detailed plan, describing each step with surgical precision. We needed irrefutable proof, and for that, it was essential to catch Claire in the act. Tyler committed to leading her into the trap. Julia would handle the technical side, ensuring everything was documented securely. Amanda then opened a brown leather briefcase and showed us what she had brought: miniature recorders, hidden cameras, and discreet microphones. Julia took one of the devices with trembling but determined hands. Tyler tested a lapel microphone, which would be clipped under his shirt. Amanda explained where to position everything, how to activate it, and how to maintain maximum naturalness. I watched that scene with a heavy heart. I never imagined I would one day need espionage strategies to protect my life. But there we were, united by something greater than fear: justice. Amanda hands over recording devices. We spent 2 days rehearsing. Amanda suggested we put a high value on the forged documents to ensure Claire would bite the bait quickly. The greedier she is, the faster she'll fall, she said. I carefully drafted the fake inheritance clause, adjusting details like deadlines and values. We decided that $2 million would be the magic number, high enough to seem real, irresistible to her. I handed the new dossier to Tyler, who took it to Claire, feigning enthusiasm. He said he had discovered an international fund linked to the house, and that it would change everything. Julia and I followed from a distance, monitoring the messages. Claire replied almost immediately, "Incredible! We need to talk urgently." Amanda just smiled as she read the content. Greed always responds first. The meeting was scheduled for the following Saturday. Claire seemed excited, as if she had finally found the opportunity of a lifetime. Tyler commented that she spent the entire afternoon reading the documents and even took notes. The bait was working perfectly. Now, all that remained was to prepare the field. The day before the meeting, we reviewed everything one more time. Amanda reinforced the crucial points, Julia organized the equipment, and I breathed. It wasn't fear, it was preparation. For the first time, I felt in control of the narrative. Claire gets excited about the idea and confirms the meeting. We arrived early at the reserved room for the fake meeting. It was a discreet room inside a hotel, specially equipped by Amanda for the occasion. Julia took care of the camera in the lampshade. Amanda positioned the main recorder at the base of a water pitcher. Tyler reviewed his lines. Everything was meticulously ready. No detail would be left to chance. Everything would be captured. Voices, expressions, promises. Derek was also present undercover, pretending to be one of the investors. He had a serious but collaborative look. It was strange to have him there on our side, but necessary. Each one had their role, and his was to confirm everything at the right moment. Amanda reviewed the sequence of actions, giving each of us what should be said, and when. Minutes before the scheduled time, my heart raced. Still, I remained calm. I had been invisible for too long to back down now. Julia squeezed my hand tenderly. Tyler adjusted his collar. Amanda stood up and announced, "It's now." The door creaked softly. Claire entered. She wore a beige blazer, a wide smile, and lively eyes. She greeted everyone with theatrical enthusiasm, suspecting nothing. Claire arrives with a confident smile. Claire sat down with an air of importance, adjusting her purse next to the chair, as if she were a director about to announce a multi-million-dollar merger. Tyler began the conversation, thanking them for their trust. Julia and I remained discreet, pretending to be just emotional support. Claire began to describe the supposed profile of the investors, using vague and evasive terms. She spoke of conglomerate and emotional heritage, without citing real names or data. Amanda, in silence, wrote everything down. Tyler, as agreed, interrupted. "But who are these investors? Names? Companies?" Claire changed the subject, said it was still sensitive information. The tension in the air became visible. Claire fiddled with her bracelets, avoided eye contact. Her mask began to crack. "You trust me, don't you?" she asked Tyler directly. He hesitated. For a second he almost broke character, but he recomposed himself. "I trust you. But I want to understand better before making any decisions." Claire smiled, trying to regain control. She repeated that it was a unique chance, that they couldn't waste time. She asked us to hand over the rest of the documentation to speed everything up. That's when I looked directly at her. "Before that, I need to show you something you don't know yet." Claire asks to trust her one more time. I opened the fake folder on the table and pulled out the highlighted sheet. International inheritance in progress, $2 million linked to Eleanor Hayes' property. Claire's eyes widened. She eagerly took the paper, read each line twice. The enthusiasm was immediate. "This changes everything," she murmured. And then, like a snake hypnotized by its own ambition, she began to make mental calculations aloud. Amanda nudged Julia discreetly. It was the signal. The main recording had started minutes ago, but now the center of the trap was activated. Claire asked about deadlines, banks, how to ensure she got a share of that amount. Everything was being recorded. Tyler provoked. "But you said the house was just a detail, remember?" Claire didn't notice the trap. She talked too much too fast. She was seduced by the invented millions. That's when Derek stood up from his chair and revealed his identity. I'm a lawyer. And all of this is being recorded. Claire turned pale. For a moment, the room was absolutely silent. Derek enters and records everything. Claire tried to compose herself. She looked at each of us as if searching for an escape route in a minefield. She said she didn't understand what was happening, that it was all a misunderstanding. Amanda, with her firm voice, replied, "You are being accused of fraud, misuse of documents, and identity theft." She handed her a copy of the falsified power of attorney. Claire tried to get up, but Julia discreetly blocked the door. She mumbled excuses, but no one believed her anymore. Amanda informed her that the material would be handed over to the prosecutor the next day. Derek confirmed that he would file a formal complaint. Claire seemed smaller, emptied, aimless. Her play was over. I stared at her calmly, but with all the strength I had left. "You thought I'd be easy to erase, didn't you?" I asked. She didn't answer. Her teary eyes no longer held charm, only despair. Amanda opened the door. "You can leave, Claire. But know that justice now has everything it needs." Claire walked slowly to the exit without looking back. Before the door closed, I stood up. "Wait." She stopped. I took a deep breath and declared, "Eleanor demands public confession." The hearing was brief but intense. Claire appeared with slumped shoulders without makeup, as if the weight of the truth had finally stolen her shine. The judge read the list of accusations and to my surprise she didn't deny them. She confirmed each item, a dry and direct confession, affirmed in exchange for a reduced sentence. A plea bargain. It was the end of the show and the beginning of her silent fall. I felt a relief that wasn't euphoria but peace. Amanda was by my side, firm as ever, and gave me a slight nod. Claire didn't look at me once, not even when the judge pronounced the sentence. It was as if she had finally understood that I was no longer the passive woman I once was. On the way out, Derek caught up with me in the courthouse hallway. He took off his glasses, visibly emotional. He said that, for a long time, he suspected his mother's actions, but he didn't have the courage to act. "I failed you when I could have helped sooner," he said. His choked voice carried more than guilt. It was sincere regret. I replied with kindness but firmness. "The important thing is that you chose the right side when it mattered most." Derek then touched my arm, looked into my eyes and apologized once again. I forgave him right there without speeches. Forgiveness wasn't forgetting. It was liberation. And I needed to move on. Derek apologizes to Eleanor for omission. In the following days, routine settled in. Tyler and Julia started visiting my house frequently, this time without excuses, without masks. Their first action was to contact Amanda to understand how they could undo the financial damage. There were documents to annul, contracts to review, and a series of retractions to make. It was a slow process but necessary. Each gesture was a silent reconstruction. Tyler reconnected with old work contacts and started collaborating on smaller projects. He was starting over with dignity without shortcuts. Julia, in turn, dedicated herself to understanding how she had been influenced and sought to become more aware. The house seemed a little lighter with them there. Not as before, but with a promise of something new. And that was enough for now. One ordinary afternoon, Tyler arrived animated. He held a letter in his hands. It was a formal job offer from a company where he had worked years ago. "They said they heard about the confusion, but they trust me," he explained, his eyes welling up. It was as if the universe was giving him a second chance. And this time he was ready. Julia hugged him and looked at me with a knowing smile. I returned her gaze with tenderness, but also with caution. I knew that starting over was possible, but only if the roots were true. For the first time in a long time, I felt that my son was becoming who I always knew he could be again. Tyler receives a genuine job offer. In time I realized there was one last thing to do. I wrote a letter by hand in my old script, full of loops and pauses. It was for Claire. Not for her but for me. I needed to close that cycle with words that would be recorded, even if they weren't read with the heart. I said I forgave her not because she deserved it but because I deserved peace. I spoke of the pain she caused, the lost time, but also the strength I discovered within myself. I said I regretted the woman she chose to be, and that I hoped that someday she could reflect on her own actions without hiding behind excuses. I ended with a simple phrase. They didn't erase me. I came back to exist. I folded the letter carefully and asked Amanda to deliver it personally. Months later, I received confirmation. Claire had read the letter. She was in the financial crimes wing, living on the basics, far from the luxury she had always cultivated. Amanda said that when she finished reading, she cried. For the first time. There were no more words. Only tears. I don't know if it was regret, shame, or just pain. But they were true tears. And that was enough for me. Not to forget, but to close. It was the end of the chapter of the woman who tried to erase me. And the beginning of the strongest version of myself. Claire cries for the first time. It was a clear morning when Amanda and I returned to the notary's office. But this time without the weight of fear. Only with the relief of the decision made. I signed the house donation papers with the calmness of someone rewriting her own story. The property that had once been the stage for so much pain would now serve as a shelter for forgotten elderly people. As I almost was. The selected NGO cared for elderly women in situations of abandonment. Amanda, who followed the entire process, said she had never felt so much pride in a case. When the documents were finalized, we went together to visit the institution's headquarters. The caregivers welcomed us with emotion, and a plaque was placed on the wall. Eleanor Hayes' room for her courage to start anew. Upon seeing that plaque, my eyes welled up. Not from sadness but from gratitude. For the first time in a long time, I felt that it had all been worth it. What was mine now belonged to something bigger, fairer, more humane. I didn't lose a house. I gained purpose. Amanda held my hand firmly and said, "Now you are part of something eternal." The institution honors Eleanor with a plaque. At home, the days began to take on new rhythms. Tyler and Julia were more present, but now consciously. Both started therapy. Tyler spoke enthusiastically about the sessions, about the ghosts he was beginning to confront. Julia also delved into her own pains, trying to understand why she had been so passive in the face of everything. There was pain but also flourishing. At a Sunday lunch while we were making a pie, Julia looked at me and said, "You shouldn't live alone anymore." My heart froze for a moment. But then Tyler completed, "We want you to live with us." The invitation came without pressure, only with tenderness. A real offer of reparation of bond. I took a deep breath, touched but cautious. I didn't answer immediately. I looked at them at the set table, at the small details that were once invisible to me. It was a beautiful gesture. But I needed it to be more than symbolic. It needed to be commitment. They understood the silence. And they respected it. For the first time I felt there was space for me. Not out of guilt but out of love. At the end of the day they left a flower at the door with a note. "We're waiting for you." And this time there was no manipulation. Just intention. They invite Eleanor to live with them. I slept with the question in mind and woke up with the answer ready. I called Tyler and told him I accepted, but with one condition. No more silence in the face of injustice. No more complicity in the name of supposed family peace. If they wanted my presence, they would also have my principles. Tyler promised. Julia cried on the phone. It was the beginning of something new. I moved in weeks later. They prepared everything carefully. A room just for me with my favorite armchair, my patchwork quilt, old photos. Every detail was an apology materialized in affection. Amanda helped with the transition. She said this was a new phase. A life where I no longer had to be the last to be remembered. On the first night in the new house, I lay looking at the ceiling and realized that, finally, I was safe. For the first time, I didn't feel like I had to justify my existence. I wasn't a guest. I was part of it. And that made all the difference. I rebuilt myself not as a wounded mother, but as a whole woman. And when Julia called me to see what they had done in the next room, I found a gift. Books, a desk, a space all my own. They called it Eleanor's Sanctuary. And I finally allowed myself to smile. They renovate a room just for her. The smell of roasted chicken filled the house like a warm embrace. The table was simple, but there was something sacred in that arrangement of old dishes, cloth napkins, and improvised flowers. Tyler clumsily chopped vegetables, while Julia played soft music in the background. I laughed easily, a rare thing a while ago. It was a Sunday like so many I had dreamed of. And that was finally becoming real. After lunch, Julia brought a box of forgotten photographs. We spread the images across the table and delved into memories. Tyler, embarrassed, tried to hide a photo of himself dressed as a bunny. We laughed together without burden like a complete, not perfect family. Each photo was a small time capsule, full of love and absence. I saw myself in many of them backstage, almost always behind the cameras. Julia picked up an image and remained silent for a few seconds. It was a photo of me, still young, holding newborn Tyler in my arms. My face was tired but illuminated, and my arms were firm around him. "You looked exhausted but happy," she said with tenderness. I smiled with my eyes. It was the beginning of everything. The image passed from hand to hand, awakening something in everyone. I felt that photo said more than words. It wasn't just a memory, it was a root. And even if so much had been lost along the way, the essential remained there before us. Julia shows a photo of young Eleanor with Tyler in her arms. That afternoon the doorbell rang. Derek was there, with a cake in his hands and a shy smile. I invited him in. He accepted with respect and humility. He no longer seemed like the divided man from before. He sat at the table, complimented the food, commented on the scattered photos. When the conversation died down, he turned to me seriously. "I came to truly thank you." He said that, after everything, he began to reevaluate his own values. That his legal education needed to align with a greater purpose. He said his mother's eyes in her cell still haunted him, not because of her suffering, but because of how long it took him to see what was right. He apologized once again, but without drama. Only truth. I listened to him attentively, with an open heart. Derek had chosen to grow, even amidst the chaos. And that was more than many could do. When Amanda arrived, she joined the conversation lightly. Derek then announced, "I'm going to dedicate myself to cases of elder protection. I want to prevent other Eleanors from suffering as you did." I was speechless for a moment. I held his hand and just said, "You're going to make a difference." He smiled, and in that moment, I felt that something greater had been planted. It wasn't just justice. It was transformation. He decides to work on elder protection cases. As the weeks passed, routine continued sweetly. I baked cakes, tended the garden, and sometimes wrote letters I never sent. For the first time, there was no urgency within me. No battle to fight. No pain suffocating my chest. Only silence and fullness. Julia told me the house seemed to smile now, and I understood what she meant. One late afternoon, I sat alone on the porch watching the sky change color. I thought about everything I had been through. The losses, the lies, the fear. And also the strength that was born in the midst of it all. It was strange to think that I almost had to be erased to finally exist completely. But there I was, alive, whole, at peace. Amanda called at that very moment. She just wanted to know how I was. "We did the right thing, didn't we?" I asked. She smiled on the other end. "You did more than right, Eleanor. You showed what courage is." I hung up with a chest full of something new, mission accomplished. And when I went back inside, there was a letter on the table. It was from an elderly woman in another state. She reported an attempted scam similar to mine. She said she read my story in an article and felt less alone. "Thank you for giving voice to our pain." Receives a letter from another elderly woman reporting a similar attempted scam. From that point on, I decided my story wouldn't end there. I joined Amanda and Derek to create a project to raise awareness about financial scams against the elderly. We visited homes, NGOs, law schools. We told my story not to relive the pain, but to warn, inspire, and prevent. It was hard, sometimes exhausting, but also deeply liberating. Amanda handled the legal part, Derek the partnerships, and I was the voice. I spoke as someone who learned the hard way. And that touched people. One afternoon, we received confirmation of our first major lecture at a national event. I was nervous, but Amanda held my hand. "You were born for this, Eleanor." On the big day, I wore my best blue coat and delicately pinned my hair. When I stepped onto the stage, the audience was made up of attentive faces, many of whom were like mine, with wrinkles, with stories, with silences. But there, at that moment, I was not a victim. I was a bridge. I told everything. Without fear, without shame. And when I finished, the applause was like a collective hug. First lecture confirmed. Back to routine, new news arrived. Julia called me into the room and handed me an envelope with an ultrasound. "We're expecting another baby," she said, her eyes shining. Tyler appeared right behind her, smiling and emotional. I was speechless for a few seconds. Life, with its generous irony, was blessing us again. After lunch, they called me into the living room. They said that, after everything we had been through, they wanted the new baby to have a meaningful name. "If it's a girl, we're going to name her Eleanor," Tyler said, holding my hand. Julia nodded with tears in her eyes. I could barely speak, such was my emotion. It took me a few seconds to reply. "Just promise to teach her that courage and tenderness can live in the same heart." They promised. We hugged there like a tree whose roots were growing strong again. That was more than a name. It was continuity. It was legacy. They chose the name Eleanor. Time passed quickly. The following Christmas, the house was full of voices, smells, and laughter. The decorated pine tree, the children running, Julia with her big belly, Amanda and Derek sitting on the sofa. I prepared a special gift. A small blue metal piggy bank carefully wrapped. It was for my eldest grandson. When I handed it to him, everyone looked with curiosity. He opened the package, looked at the piggy bank and asked, "Is that all, Grandma?" I sat next to him and said, "This piggy bank isn't for saving money. It's for saving what's truly valuable." Inside, there were small papers with words like truth, hug, respect. Tyler smiled with tears in his eyes. Julia kissed my hand. I made a simple toast. I said that this was the most special Christmas of my life, and that the best gift I received was to have truly come back to exist among them. The piggy bank now sat on the shelf, and he promised to fill it with good memories. I knew I was leaving more than teachings. I was leaving love. You will learn that true value is not in price but in care. Now, I'm curious about you who heard my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you experienced something similar? Support the channel by subscribing, liking, commenting, and sharing this video. I'm leaving another story on the final screen that you'll also like, and it will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.